Hello. Today I have a little bit of a longer book, and this is called National Geographic Kids book, and it's called Ellis Island. And it's a good informational book written by Elizabeth Carney. And if you notice some spots on my face and here, I got splattered with some hot butter. It hurt a lot, and now it just looks kind of funny. So anyway, this book is called Ellis Island. It was New Year's Day in 1892. Annie Moore took her two little brothers' hands. They walked onto the dock at Ellis Island, New York. A government building on the island had just opened. There, workers would decide whether to let them into the United States. And this is what it looks like today. I've been there. It's a very neat place to go. It's right by the Statue of Liberty. Immigrants were arriving at Ellis Island around 1900. An immigrant is someone who comes from another country to live in another country. Annie and her brothers were immigrants. They had come from another country and were looking for a new life in America. Annie would be the first to walk through the building's doors. Over the next 30 years, millions would follow. And that is what my grandma did. And she was from Germany, so we call her Oma. Annie's $10 gold piece would be about worth $200 today. This statue of Annie Moore and her brothers stand in Cobh, Ireland. And I might not have pronounced that correctly, in Ireland. 17-year-old Annie had sailed across the Atlantic Ocean from her home in Ireland. She and her brothers made the trip alone. Their parents had moved to New York City 2 years earlier. They had saved up the money to pay for their children's trip. Officials looked over the kids and said Annie and her brother could enter America. Because Annie was the first immigrant to arrive at Ellis Island, one official gave her a $10 gold piece. It was the most money Annie had ever had. And how much would it be worth today? Do you remember? About $200. That is a big gift, isn't it? From 1892 to 1924, Ellis Island served as the main gateway to America. As each steamship chugged into the New York harbor, immigrants saw the Statue of Liberty. To them, the statue stood for the freedom they wanted so badly. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, life in Europe was very difficult. Many people were forced to leave their homelands. In some places, you could be jailed or killed for practicing a certain religion or speaking out against the government. Food and jobs were hard to find. Many immigrants believed that America offered the best chance for a better life. And they came over on a steamship, and that means the ship was powered by steam, not gas or diesel or coal. In her own words, "We saw the Statue of Liberty, and Mother said to me, 'That means we are free.'" That was said by Margaret Wardle, who came from Hungary, and she was 7 years old when she said that. Immigrants arrive in New York Harbor and see the Statue of Liberty in the early 1900s. And here's a photograph of that. Immigrants from Europe had to cross the Atlantic Ocean to reach America. During Ellis Island's busiest years, immigrants came on steamships. The voyage lasted about 12 days. Most steamship passengers traveled in steerage. That's the bottom of the ship. These tickets were the cheapest, but in steerage, it was uncomfortable and dangerous. No fresh air reached this part of the ship. Hundreds of people packed into the crowded bunks. The vomit of seasick passengers covered the floor. Most immigrants couldn't wait to arrive in America to get off that ship. You don't blame them, do you? That would be terrible. The drawing shows steerage passengers on their way to America. Well, most immigrants, the picture I'm going to show you, while most immigrants from Asia entered the United States on the West Coast, a few did come through Ellis Island. The percentage of people from different areas of the world are rounded. That is why the total sum of percentages doesn't equal 100%. And here's a picture of that as well. And you can study that if you want to pause the video. Gull Island. Immigrants may not have known it, but the little island they were arriving on had a long history. Hundreds of years ago, the island barely peaked above the water during high tides. The Lenape Native Americans called it Kioshik, which means Gull Island. Only seagulls live there. In 1624, the Dutch arrived at what is now called New York City. They called the little island Little Oyster Island for the oysters that harvested from its shores. And here's a seagull and some oysters. And here's an illustration of the Dutch buying Manhattan Island, New York, from the Lenape Native Americans in 1622. And a picture of a harbor. Many years later, New York became a British colony. In 1774, right before the Revolutionary War, an American businessman named Samuel Ellis bought the little island. Ellis named the island after himself. If you had the island, what would you name it? The U.S. government took over Ellis Island in 1808 and built a small fort. After that, the island was used mainly to store gunpowder. It wasn't until 1890 that officials decided to build an immigration station on Ellis Island. Some people thought it was the best way to keep immigrants off the mainland while they were inspected. Then they could enter America. They were inspected to make sure they were healthy and didn't carry any diseases. And I'm not going to read all this, but this is all the different buildings that are on Ellis Island. So if it's something you're interested in, you could pause the video and look that over. Imagine it. You arrive in a new country after a hard trip. You have little more than the money in your pockets and a few of your most precious things. People wearing uniforms poke you, inspect you, and ask you questions. It's like taking a difficult test, and you just hope you pass. Most passengers had to wait a long time during the immigration process at Ellis Island. At best, they were allowed to enter the United States. At worst, they were sent back to the countries which they came from. And here's a family from Hungary. Can you imagine being sent back, 12 more days going back? Once inside the main buildings on Ellis Island, immigrants climbed a steep staircase. Doctors watched their every move. Again, they wanted to make sure everyone was healthy. If people appeared sick or disabled, they were pulled away from their families and given a full medical exam. Doctors checked immigrants for an infection that causes blindness. It was common in Europe, but not in the United States. The doctors turned the immigrants' eyelids inside out with a tool called a button hook. People who showed signs of infection were sent back to their home countries. Because the disease was common in Europe, they didn't want that disease to become common in the United States and then have a lot of people in the United States going blind as well. The next stop was a huge registry room. Here, people waited to answer questions from other inspectors. Interpreters reworded the inspectors' questions into the immigrants' home languages. So, an interpreter is someone who translates one language into the other so they could be sure to understand what was being asked. Inspectors asked, "How old are you? Are you married? What's your job or trade?" They wanted to make sure the immigrants' answers matched the information on the ship's records. They also asked questions about right and wrong behavior. They hoped to spot out likely criminals. This inspection took only a few minutes. Most immigrants passed. The reward? A landing card that officially allowed them to enter the United States. And that's what it looked like. And here's where they waited while they were asked all the questions. 6 cool facts about Ellis Island. 1, more than 40% of Americans today can trace their roots back to one or more people who came through Ellis Island. And I told you I can too. Number 2, during the busiest years, Ellis Island had 5,000 immigrants pass through it per day. Fiorella LaGuardia worked as an interpreter on Ellis Island for 3 years. He later served as a U.S. congressman and then as mayor of New York City. And 4, more Ellis Island immigrants came from Italy than any other country. And 5, made completely of wood, the original Ellis Island building caught fire in June 1897. They burned to the ground in 6 hours. The current building opened on December 17, 1900. Less than 2%, number 6, less than 2% of the 12 million people who passed through Ellis Island doors failed inspection. They were sent back to their home country. What happened when immigrants didn't pass inspection right away? Sick immigrants went to the island hospital for care. Sometimes people who didn't pass the first round of questions were held for more questioning. Women traveling alone were not allowed to leave Ellis Island until a relative came to meet them. And here's a picture of one waiting for a relative to come get her. A dormitory for women and children on Ellis Island, and then a photo that shows a dining hall in 1907. It's neat to see the old photographs. It gives you a better idea of what was happening. This fenced area on the roof of the main building held immigrants who were being deported. Deported means they were getting sent back to their country. After a while, officials allowed most immigrants into America, but a small number ended up being deported. Usually such people didn't have enough money to try to move to America again. For them, their dream of living in America was over. There's a picture of some men waiting to go back, it looks like they're all men. Many people believe that inspectors changed their family's last name when their ancestors arrived at Ellis Island. But that didn't happen. Instead, the inspectors at Ellis Island were most concerned about making sure immigrants' names matched ship records. They didn't care about spelling. The inspectors worked closely with interpreters who spoke an average of 6 languages. That's wonderful and incredible. Interpreters tried to make sure there were no misunderstandings between inspectors and immigrants. So why did some name changes happen? It was common for immigrants to change their last names themselves after arriving in the U.S. They often did this to make their names sound more American or to fit in more with the community. And this is a wall of immigrants that you can go see, and here's some people looking for their family name. Groups of people often helped Ellis Island immigrants in need. They brought warm clothes, food, music, and treats, especially for the children. And there's a picture of volunteers giving donuts in 1920. And a fun fact here, it says 350 babies were born at Ellis Island, so maybe while they were waiting. Interesting. One of the best known helpers was Ludmilla Kucher Foxley. She immigrated to the United States when she was 4. She knew what the immigrants were going through. Foxley kept detailed records and worked with large number of immigrants. She organized holiday parties and other festivals to cheer up immigrants held on the island. And here's a picture of her. And then here's a picture of kids playing on the rooftop. And look how they have American flags because they're so happy to be in the United States. Immigrants' experiences on Ellis Island were only the beginning. Landing cards in hand, they set out to begin their lives in America. Some immigrants stayed in New York City. Many traveled to places where they had family and friends who had immigrated earlier. They looked for jobs and places to live. And here's a picture of immigrants in 1900 in Manhattan, New York. Many immigrants flocked to parts of the country that were growing. Sometimes immigrants filled entire communities. Common jobs for immigrants included working at mills or factories, working as loggers, or building railroads. And here they are building a railroad. The United States would be a very different place without immigrants. From food to music to sports, immigrants have shaped the American way of life. And as immigrants poured into the country through Ellis Island and other immigration centers, America became known as a melting pot. This means that America was a place where cultures mixed freely. And then here's some pictures of some different immigrants from different countries. So I'll put that up so you can look at that. I was just thinking as I read that last night, we had Thai food. We walked by a German restaurant, and across the street there was an Irish restaurant. So that's just one great benefit we have from all the immigrants. Meet a few of the immigrants who passed through Ellis Island. They and many others went on to accomplish great things. Claudette Colbert was a Broadway actress. She came from France. Songwriter Irving Berlin came, and he went on to write the song God Bless America and many, many other songs. Harry Houdini, he was a great magician. And Abraham Beame was a baby when he first came, and then they came from London, and he later became the mayor. And then you can read more detail about those famous people. In the 1920s, the United States passed laws that limited the number of immigrants who were allowed into the country. Fewer and fewer people passed through the once busy island. One worker at the time compared the island to a deserted village. In the 1940s, the United States government used the island for a different purpose. It became a prison to hold people accused of siding with the America's enemies during World War II. After the war, only a few dozen immigrants came through Ellis Island each year. Ellis Island closed for good in 1954. And here's two pictures. The one says a man in his sleeping quarters. He was held at Ellis Island around 1943, and then a picture of a recreation field on Ellis Island around 1943. This room was used to be a hospital ward, and then they're remodeling it to fix it up for the museum. Once Ellis Island shut down, its buildings fell to ruin. President Lyndon Johnson named Ellis Island a national monument in 1965, but no money was spent to fix it up. Finally, in the 1980s, a group called the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation worked to raise money to restore the site. The work cost $160 million. At the time, the project was the most expensive of its kind. When the main building was finished, it looked similar to the way it did long ago. So they restored it. They made it look back to how it used to be. Charles Beller arrived from Russia at the age of 6, and this is what he said. I wanted to be an American. I wanted to make the most of my opportunities, and I did just that. On September 10th, 1990, Ellis Island opened as a museum. Today, more than 2 million people visit it each year. The exhibits tell the story of U.S. immigration. Some people go to learn more about where their ancestors came from. In these halls, visitors learn about the brave people who risked so much for a chance for a better life. They began their journey as immigrants. In time, they called themselves Americans. And this is what it looks like today if you go for a visit. Did you enjoy that book? Do you want to check to see how well you listened? Do you want to take a quiz? The back of the book says quiz. How much do you know about Ellis Island? Ready? Question number 1. Ellis Island is now what? What is it now? Is it a museum? Is it a port? Is it a library or a train station? Do you know? Did you say museum? You'd be right. Number 2. Why did most steamship passengers travel in steerage? Do you remember what I said steerage was in the bottom? Why do you think they did? Was it the cheapest? Was it the most luxurious and fancy? Was it the safest? Or was it the fastest? What do you say? It was the cheapest, right? That's why they were down there. Number 3, more Ellis Island immigrants came from what country? Where did most of them come from? Do you remember? Was it Russia, Ireland, Germany, or Italy? Do you remember? If you said Italy, you're right. Number 4. Which of the following describes the job as an interpreter? What's an interpreter? Are they a cook? Do they put words in one language and then into another? Do they perform eye inspections? Or do they decide which immigrants can come into the country? An interpreter, what do they do? They don't cook. That's right, they put words in one language into another. Number 5, what happens to immigrants who were deported? A, they were put in jail. B, they were transported to New York City. C, they were given a landing card. Or D, they were sent back to their home country. Do you remember? They were deported. They couldn't stay and they had to go back to their own country, right? Number 6, Ellis Island is located near what other national monument? Is it the White House, the Statue of Liberty, Fort Sumter, or Mount Rushmore? That's right, Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty. It's right there. Last question. How are you doing so far? Which of the following was not a use for Ellis Island at one time or another? A prison, an immigration station, a courthouse, or a fort? Which one was it never used as? It was never used as a courthouse, so it was used as a prison, an immigration house, and a fort. I hope you enjoyed that book. I think these National Geographic books for kids are really good. I hope you learned something. Tell somebody something you learned today about this.